Sarah Martinez stepped off the bus at Naval Base Coronado with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder and determination burning in her chest. The California sun beat down mercilessly as she joined the line of recruits waiting to begin basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. At 24, she was older than most of the fresh-faced college graduates around her, but her military experience as a Marine had taught her that age meant nothing when bullets started flying. The other recruits barely glanced her way as they formed up in the courtyard. Most were busy sizing each other up, trying to figure out who would make it through the legendary hell that was SEAL training and who would ring the bell in defeat. Sarah kept her eyes forward, her jaw set in a hard line that had become her trademark during 4 years in the Corps. Well, what do we have here? The voice belonged to Jake Morrison, a linebacker-sized recruit from Texas who had been talking nonstop since they left the processing center. His eyes swept over Sarah with barely concealed amusement. Looks like they're letting anyone try out for the teams these days. A few of the guys around him chuckled, but Sarah didn't react. She had heard worse during her time in the Marines, where being one of the few women in combat roles meant constantly proving herself. Her silence only seemed to encourage Morrison. "I'm serious, sweetheart," he continued, his voice loud enough for half the formation to hear. "This isn't some weekend warrior course. We're talking about becoming Navy SEALs here. The toughest warriors on the planet. Maybe you should have signed up for the Coast Guard instead." More laughter rippled through the group. Sarah felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. Getting emotional would only prove their point. Instead, she focused on the memory that had driven her here in the first place. 2 years ago, she had been on patrol in Afghanistan when her convoy hit an improvised explosive device. The blast had thrown her Humvee 30 feet through the air, killing her driver instantly and trapping her squad leader under twisted metal. While enemy fire rained down around them, Sarah had single-handedly extracted 3 wounded Marines and held off the attackers until reinforcements arrived. The Navy Cross she received for that action was pinned to her dress blues back home, but she had never told anyone about the real reason she left the Marines to pursue SEAL training. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Morrison said, stepping closer. "You deaf or just stupid?" Before Sarah could respond, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The recruits immediately snapped to attention as a group of instructors approached. These weren't ordinary drill sergeants. These were SEAL instructors, and their reputations preceded them like storm clouds. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez led the group, his scarred face showing no emotion as he surveyed the fresh meat before him. Behind him walked Petty Officer Williams, whose arms were covered in tattoos that told the story of deployments to every hellhole on Earth. The third instructor was someone Sarah didn't recognize, but his bearing screamed special operations. "Welcome to the most miserable 6 months of your pathetic lives," Chief Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying easily across the formation. "Some of you think you know what hard is. Some of you think your high school football coach was tough. Some of you think Bootcamp prepared you for this." He paused, letting his eyes sweep across the group of hopeful faces. "You're all wrong. This is BUD/S, and Bud/S doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care about your mommy issues or your girlfriend problems or whatever sob story brought you here. Bud/S cares about one thing. Can you perform when everything goes to hell?" Sarah felt a familiar thrill run through her body. This was what she had come for. This was where she would prove that the nightmares that woke her up screaming weren't a sign of weakness, but fuel for becoming something more. "Now, before we begin this beautiful journey together," Rodriguez continued, "let's get one thing straight. I don't care if you're black, white, brown, or purple. I don't care if you're rich or poor, smart or stupid, tall or short. The ocean will try to drown all of you equally." His eyes found Sarah in the formation, and for a moment, she thought she saw something flicker across his face. Recognition, maybe? But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. That said, Rodriguez went on, "Some of you clearly don't belong here. Some of you are tourists who watch too many movies and think this is some kind of adventure vacation. Those people will be identified and removed quickly. Morrison shifted slightly, and Sarah could sense his smugness radiating outward. He thought the chief was talking about her. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was crazy to think she could make it through a program designed to break the strongest men in the world. The first week of training was exactly as advertised. Hell on earth. The days started before dawn with crushing physical training sessions that left grown men sobbing in the sand. The nights were filled with classroom instruction on topics ranging from underwater demolition to advanced weapon systems. Sleep became a luxury measured in minutes rather than hours. Through it all, Morrison and his growing group of followers kept up their commentary on Sarah's presence. During meal breaks, she would hear whispered conversations about whether she would make it through another day. During training exercises, she caught them placing bets on when she would finally ring out. "I give her until the end of the week," she heard Morrison tell another recruit as they prepared for their morning swim. "No way she makes it through Hell Week." Sarah gritted her teeth and dove into the frigid Pacific Ocean. The shock of the cold water hit her like a physical blow, but she forced herself to maintain proper form as she swam toward the first buoy. Around her, other recruits struggled with the distance and the temperature. Some are already falling behind, their dreams of becoming SEALs dissolving in the salt water. But Sarah had been swimming in cold water since she was a child growing up in northern Michigan. Her father had been a fisherman, and he had taught her that the water didn't care about your comfort. It only cared about your respect and your skill. She reached the first buoy ahead of most of the class, including Morrison. The harassment continued during weapons training. When the instructor demonstrated proper rifle handling techniques, Morrison made loud comments about whether Sarah had ever fired anything bigger than a BB gun. When they practiced small unit tactics, he questioned whether she understood the difference between cover and concealment. What Morrison didn't know was that Sarah had logged over 200 combat patrols during her time in the Marines. She had fired every weapon in the American arsenal and several that weren't supposed to exist. Her marksmanship scores were consistently in the top 5% of her class, and her tactical understanding had been forged in the crucible of actual warfare. The breaking point came during the third week of training. The class was conducting surf passage exercises, learning to navigate small boats through the crushing waves of the Pacific. It was dangerous work that required perfect teamwork and absolute trust in your boat crew. One mistake could result in serious injury or death. Sarah found herself assigned to Morrison's boat crew, along with 4 other recruits. As they prepared to launch their inflatable boat into the churning surf, Morrison pulled the team into a huddle. "Listen up," he said, his voice low but intense. "This is serious business out there. We need everyone pulling their weight if we want to make it back alive. If someone can't hack it, they need to speak up now before we all end up as shark food." His eyes were fixed on Sarah as he spoke. The message was clear. He didn't trust her to do her part when things got tough. "I've got this," Sarah replied simply. "Let's go." The first few runs went smoothly. The boat crew worked together to time their entry into the surf zone, using their paddles to power through the waves while the coxswain steered from the stern. Sarah's position was in the bow, where she was responsible for calling out obstacles and helping to navigate through the chaos of broken water. On their fourth run, everything went wrong at once. A larger-than-normal set of waves caught them just as they were entering the surf zone, and their boat was lifted high into the air before being slammed down into a trough between waves. The impact threw 2 of the crew members overboard and left the boat taking on water. Morrison, who was serving as coxswain for this run, immediately began shouting orders. But in his panic, he was contradicting himself and confusing the remaining crew members. Sarah could see that they were going to capsize if someone didn't take control of the situation immediately. "Morrison, hard left," she shouted over the roar of the waves. "We need to get parallel to the wave line." "Shut up," Morrison screamed back. "I'm the coxswain here." But his next steering input sent them directly into the path of an incoming wave. Sarah watched in slow motion as the wall of water approached their small boat. In seconds, they would all be in the water fighting for their lives. Without hesitation, Sarah lunged toward the stern and grabbed the steering paddle from Morrison's hands. Using all her strength, she managed to turn the boat just enough to take the wave at an angle instead of head-on. The boat rode up and over the crest, keeping them upright and giving them a chance to rescue their overboard teammates. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Morrison roared as they pulled the two swimmers back into the boat. "Saving our asses," Sarah replied calmly. "Your steering was going to kill us all." The boat crew made it back to shore safely, but Morrison was furious. As soon as they dragged their boat up onto the beach, he got in Sarah's face. "You have no right to take command from me," he snarled. "I don't care what you think you saw out there. Chain of command exists for a reason. Chain of command doesn't mean anything if the person in charge is going to get everyone killed," Sarah shot back. "I've been in actual combat, Morrison. I know the difference between leadership and panic. Actual combat." Morrison laughed. "What? Directing traffic at some FOB in the rear. That's not the same as what we're training for here, princess." Sarah felt something snap inside her chest. The careful control she had maintained for weeks suddenly crumbled, and before she could stop herself, she was speaking. "I earned a Navy Cross pulling 3 Marines out of a burning Humvee while taking enemy fire," she said quietly. "I spent 18 months running patrols in the most dangerous province in Afghanistan. I've killed more enemy combatants than you've killed cockroaches in your college dorm room. So don't tell me about combat experience, you ignorant piece of trash." The beach went quiet. Every recruit in earshot had stopped what they were doing to listen. Morrison's face had gone pale, and for the first time since training began, he seemed to be at a loss for words. Before anyone could respond, Chief Rodriguez appeared beside them. His face was unreadable as he looked from Morrison to Sarah and back again. "Is there a problem here?" he asked in a voice that could cut steel. "No, Chief," Morrison said quickly. "Just discussing boat crew assignments." Rodriguez studied him for a long moment, then turned his attention to Sarah. "Martinez with me." "Now." Sarah followed the chief away from the group, her heart pounding. She had lost her temper and revealed information she had intended to keep private. Now, she was probably going to be dropped from training for causing a disruption. Rodriguez led her to a small office building overlooking the beach. Once they were inside with the door closed, he turned to face her. "Sit down, Martinez," he said. "We need to talk." Sarah sat rigidly in the metal chair, staring straight ahead as Chief Rodriguez settled behind his desk. The office was spartanly decorated with commendation plaques and photographs showing various SEAL operations around the world. Her eyes involuntarily drifted to a framed photo showing a group of operators in desert camouflage, their faces painted with exhaustion and victory. "You want to tell me what really happened out there?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying none of the harsh edge she had grown accustomed to during training. "Morrison was panicking during the surf passage," Sarah replied honestly. "His steering was going to flip us. I took corrective action to prevent casualties." Rodriguez nodded slowly, then opened a manila folder on his desk. Sarah caught a glimpse of what looked like military records before he positioned it, so she couldn't see the contents. "Staff Sergeant Martinez, USMC," he read aloud. "3 deployments to Afghanistan. Multiple commendations, including a Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during combat operations in Helmand Province." He looked up at her. "Says here you single-handedly extracted 3 wounded Marines from an overturned vehicle while under enemy fire, then held off a platoon-sized enemy force until reinforcements arrived." Sarah said nothing. The memories of that day were burned into her mind with perfect clarity. The smell of diesel fuel and burning rubber. The screams of wounded men. The steady crack of AK-47 fire getting closer as the Taliban fighters closed in on their position. "It also says," Rodriguez continued, "that you were medically retired from the Corps 6 months after that incident due to combat-related PTSD. So my question is, what's a decorated Marine veteran with documented psychological issues doing in my training program?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah had known this conversation would come eventually. The military's medical records were thorough, and SEAL Command would have access to everything. Because I need to finish what I started, she said finally. That day in Afghanistan, I lost good Marines because we weren't prepared for what we faced. My team was good, but we weren't elite. We weren't trained to handle impossible situations and still complete the mission. And you think SEAL training is going to fix your PTSD? Rodriguez asked skeptically. No, Sarari Plaiv. I think SEAL training is going to give me the tools to make sure what happened to my Marines never happens to anyone under my command again. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, then closed the folder. The nightmares haven't stopped, have they? Sarah's composure cracked slightly. She had been careful not to let anyone see the signs of her ongoing struggle with trauma. The sleepless nights, the hypervigilance, the way loud noises made her reach for weapons that weren't there. No, Chief, they haven't, she admitted. But they don't interfere with my performance. Maybe not yet, Rodriguez said. But Hell Week is coming up. That's when this program stops being about physical fitness and starts being about mental toughness. When you're running on no sleep for 5 days straight, when every instructor is screaming at you to quit, when your body is breaking down and your mind is playing tricks on you, those nightmares might become a bigger problem. Sarah straightened in her chair. With respect, Chief, I've been living in Hell Week for 2 years. Whatever you can throw at me, I've already survived worse. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since she had met him, Sarah thought she saw something that might have been approval in his eyes. We'll see about that, Martinez. But here's the thing. Morrison and his crew are going to keep pushing your buttons. They think you're a weak link, and they're going to test that theory every chance they get. How you handle that pressure is going to determine whether you make it through this program. I can handle Morrison, Sarah said. Can you? Because from where I sit, it looks like he already got under your skin enough to make you lose your temper in front of the whole class. That's not the kind of emotional control we expect from SEALs. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame. He was right. She had let Morrison provoke her into revealing information she had wanted to keep private. In combat, that kind of emotional reaction could get people killed. It won't happen again, Chief, she said. Make sure it doesn't, Rodriguez replied. Because I'm going to be watching you very closely during Hell Week. If I see any sign that your past trauma is affecting your performance or putting other students at risk, I'll drop you from the program faster than you can say Navy Cross. He dismissed her with a nod, and Sarah made her way back to the barracks feeling like she was walking on a knife's edge. The other recruits were scattered around the common area, some studying, others trying to catch a few minutes of rest before evening chow. Morrison was holding court near the window, and Sarah could hear fragments of his conversation as she passed. Told you she was unstable, probably has nightmares about her period or something. No way she makes it past next week. Sarah kept walking, but she could feel eyes following her across the room. Word of her confrontation with Morrison had spread, and now everyone was watching to see how she would handle the pressure. She grabbed her study materials and found a quiet corner where she could review the next day's lesson plans in peace. The material was challenging: advanced combat diving techniques, underwater demolition procedures, and small unit tactics. Sarah threw herself into memorizing every detail, using the academic work as a way to quiet the voices in her head that kept replaying Morrison's words. The next few days passed in a blur of increasingly difficult training evolutions. The instructors seemed to take special pleasure in making the exercises as miserable as possible, finding new ways to test the recruits' physical and mental limits. During a particularly brutal log PT session, where teams of 6 men had to carry a 200-pound telephone pole through various exercises, Morrison's team deliberately slowed their pace when passing Sarah's group. "Keep up, ladies," he called out as his team jogged past. "We don't have all day." Sarah's team was actually ahead of schedule, but Morrison's comment was calculated to make it seem like they were falling behind. It was a psychological game designed to undermine confidence and create doubt. Sarah recognized the tactic because she had seen similar mind games played by enemy interrogators during her survival training. Later that day, during combat swimming exercises, Morrison's harassment took a more dangerous turn. The class was practicing underwater, not tying skills in the deep end of the pool when Sarah felt someone grab her ankle and yank her downward. She fought against the grip, but whoever was holding her had a strong grasp and was deliberately keeping her from surfacing. Her lungs began to burn as she struggled against the unknown attacker. In the murky water of the pool, she couldn't see who was holding her down, but she had a pretty good idea. Sarah reached in her training and forced herself to remain calm. Panicking would only make her consume oxygen faster. Instead, she used a combat technique she had learned during Marine close-quarters combat training. Twisting her body into a position that gave her leverage, she drove her heel backward into what she hoped was her attacker's solar plexus. The grip on her ankle immediately loosened, and she kicked hard toward the surface. Sarah broke through the water, gasping for air, her lungs burning from the extended time underwater. Around the pool, other recruits were completing their exercises, seemingly unaware of what had just happened. The instructor was focused on a different group, leaving Sarah to wonder if anyone had witnessed the attack. Morrison surfaced a few seconds later, about 10 feet away from her position. His face was flushed, and he was breathing hard, but he immediately began his exercise routine as if nothing had happened. When their eyes met across the pool, he gave her a cold smile that confirmed her suspicions. Sarah wanted to report the incident immediately, but she knew it would be her word against Morrison's. Without witnesses or evidence, it would look like she was making excuses or trying to get him in trouble because of their previous confrontation. Worse, it might give the instructors reason to question her ability to handle adversity. Instead, she finished her own exercise and filed the incident away in her memory. Morrison had just escalated their conflict to a dangerous level, and she needed to be prepared for whatever came next. The harassment continued and intensified as Hell Week approached. Morrison and his allies found increasingly creative ways to make Sarah's life miserable. They hid her gear before inspections, forcing her to scramble to find replacement items or face the wrath of the instructors. They spread rumors about her mental health, suggesting that she was unstable and likely to break under pressure. During a nighttime navigation exercise in the mountains outside San Diego, Morrison's team somehow managed to sabotage Sarah's compass, leaving her lost in the wilderness with no way to find the designated checkpoint. She spent 4 hours using the stars and natural landmarks to navigate back to base, arriving just before the deadline for automatic dismissal from training. The psychological pressure was exactly what Rodriguez had warned her about. Sarah found herself constantly on edge, waiting for the next attack. Her sleep, already disrupted by recurring nightmares, became even more fragmented as she stayed alert for potential threats from her own classmates. But the harassment was also teaching her something important about herself. Every time Morrison and his crew tried to break her down, she discovered reserves of strength and determination she didn't know she possessed. The same mental toughness that had carried her through combat was serving her well in this new battlefield. 2 days before Hell Week was scheduled to begin, Sarah was approached by another recruit named David Chun. Chun was a quiet former Army Ranger who had kept largely to himself during training. Unlike many of the other students, he had never participated in Morrison's campaign of harassment. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Chun asked as they finished evening chow. They walked outside to a small courtyard where they could speak privately. Chun looked around to make sure they weren't being overheard before speaking. "I know what Morrison's been doing to you," he said quietly. "The gear sabotaged, the compass thing, all of it. A few of us have been watching, and we don't like what we're seeing." Sarah felt a surge of relief. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged that the harassment was real and deliberate. "Why haven't you said anything?" she asked. Chun shrugged. "Same reason you haven't, I guess. No proof, and the instructors would probably just tell us to handle it ourselves. But Hell Week is different. When we're all exhausted and pushed to our limits, that's when accidents happen. That's when someone gets seriously hurt. What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked. "I'm suggesting that some of us are going to be keeping an eye on you during Hell Week. Not because we don't think you can handle yourself, but because we know Morrison is planning something big. He's been talking about how Hell Week is when the weak links get exposed. Sarah appreciated the gesture, but she also knew it came with risks. If Chun and his allies were seen protecting her, it would only reinforce Morrison's narrative that she needed special treatment. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I need to handle this myself. If I can't deal with one bully, how am I supposed to handle enemy combatants?" Chun nodded, understanding her position. "Just know that not everyone in this class thinks Morrison is right. There are good people here who respect what you've done and what you're trying to accomplish." That conversation gave Sarah the mental boost she needed heading into the most challenging week of her life. Whatever Morrison had planned, whatever test the instructors would throw at them, she would face it all with the knowledge that she wasn't completely alone. Hell Week began at sunset on Sunday with the traditional breakout. Sarah and the rest of the class were relaxing in their barracks when the doors suddenly exploded open and instructors stormed in shouting orders. Within seconds, the recruits were being herded outside where they were met with the sound of automatic weapons firing blanks, simulated explosions, and instructors screaming at maximum volume. The message was clear: their time of relative comfort was over. For the next 5 days, they would be pushed beyond what any of them thought was humanly possible. Sleep would become a luxury measured in minutes. Food would be scarce and cold. Their bodies would be subjected to temperatures, distances, and weights that would test the limits of human endurance. But for Sarah, Hell Week represented something different. It was her chance to prove once and for all that she belonged among the elite warriors of the Navy SEALs. It was her opportunity to show Morrison and everyone else that her gender and her past trauma didn't define her capabilities. As the instructors herded them toward their first evolution, Sarah caught sight of a figure standing in the shadows near the administration building. Even in the chaos and poor lighting, there was something familiar about the man's silhouette, something that made her wonder if there was more to her presence in this training class than she had originally understood. The first night of Hell Week passed in a blur of sand, surf, and screaming instructors. Sarah's class was put through a series of evolutions designed to shock their systems and establish the tempo for the next 5 days. They carried boats over their heads for miles along the beach, performed countless push-ups in the surf, and endured hours of physical training that left several recruits vomiting in the sand. Morrison's harassment continued even as the official torture began. During a particularly brutal boat-carrying exercise, his team managed to position themselves directly behind Sarah's group. Every time the instructors looked away, Morrison would kick sand at her or deliberately bump in her boat crew, throwing off their rhythm and making the exercise even more difficult. But Sarah had learned something important during her weeks of dealing with his psychological warfare. Morrison's attacks were making her stronger. Every dirty trick he pulled, every attempt to undermine her confidence, only reinforced her determination to succeed. The rage that had once consumed her after losing her Marines was now focused into a laser-sharp commitment to proving herself worthy of the SEAL teams. By Tuesday morning, half the original class had rung the bell and quit. The infamous bronze bell sat in the center of the training compound like a siren song, calling to anyone whose will was beginning to crack. All a recruit had to do was walk over and ring it 3 times, and their suffering would end. They would be warm, fed, and comfortable within the hour. Sarah looked at the bell every time she passed it, not because she was tempted to quit, but because it reminded her why she was there. Somewhere in Afghanistan, there were young Marines facing the same kinds of impossible situations she had faced. The difference was that now she had the opportunity to become the kind of operator who could save them when everything went wrong. The second major incident with Morrison came during Wednesday's rock portage evolution. The remaining recruits were required to carry their heavy, inflatable boats from the ocean up and over a series of sharp rocks and back into the water on the other side. It was dangerous work that required precise coordination between boat crews. One mistake could result in serious injury. Sarah's crew had just reached the top of the rocks when Morrison's group appeared beside them. In the confusion of multiple teams trying to navigate the same treacherous terrain, Morrison managed to position himself next to Sarah as they prepared to lower their boats down the far side. "Hope you're ready for a swim, Princess," he whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Before Sarah could react, Morrison grabbed the rope attached to her boat and gave it a sharp yank at exactly the wrong moment. The sudden tension caused Sarah's crew to lose control of their boat, which began sliding sideways toward a jagged outcropping of rocks that could easily break bones. Sarah threw herself backward, using her body weight to arrest the boat's momentum. The rope burned through her gloves and cut into her palms, but she managed to stop the boat before it crushed anyone. The maneuver saved her crew from serious injury, but it also meant they had to restart the entire evolution. "Martinez," bellowed Petty Officer Williams. "What the hell kind of seamanship was that? You trying to kill your whole crew?" Sarah wanted to explain what had happened, but she knew it would sound like an excuse. Instead, she took responsibility for the mistake and led her crew through the evolution again. As they finally reached the water, she caught Morrison grinning at her from across the beach. But someone else had been watching the incident with much more interest. Standing on an elevated platform overlooking the training area was a man Sarah hadn't seen before. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades spent in dangerous places. Most importantly, he was wearing the uniform of a Navy SEAL commander, complete with the trident insignia that marked him as one of the most elite warriors in the American military. Commander Michael Torres had arrived at Coronado that morning for what was supposed to be a routine inspection of the training program. As the commanding officer of SEAL Team 7, he was responsible for ensuring that the operators being produced by BUD/S were ready for the realities of modern warfare. What he hadn't expected was to recognize one of the recruits struggling through Hell Week. Torres had been the mission commander during the operation to extract Sarah's unit from Afghanistan 2 years earlier. He had been the one who coordinated the helicopter gunships that finally drove off the Taliban attack. He had also been the one who read the after-action reports describing how a single Marine had held off an entire enemy platoon while wounded comrades were evacuated to safety. More importantly, Torres had been present during Sarah's medical evaluation at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. He had seen the psychological assessment that documented her PTSD symptoms. He had also seen something the psychiatrist had missed, the kind of unbreakable mental toughness that couldn't be taught or faked. Torres made his way down to the beach level and approached Chief Rodriguez, who was supervising the next evolution. "Chief, I need to speak with you privately," Torres said. They walked to a position where they could observe the training, but speak without being overheard by the recruits. "Tell me about Martinez," Torres said without preamble. Rodriguez glanced towards Sarah, who was helping her boat crew prepare for the next exercise. "Tough as nails, sir. Former Marine with combat experience. Some of the other recruits have been giving her a hard time, but she's handling it." "What kind of hard time?" Torres asked, his voice carrying a sharp edge. Rodriguez hesitated. As an instructor, he was supposed to let the recruits sort out their own interpersonal conflicts. But there was something in the commander's tone that suggested this wasn't a casual inquiry. "Mostly psychological harassment, sir. One recruit in particular seems to have made it his mission to break her down." "Morrison, Jake Morrison from Texas." Torres nodded slowly. "And how's Martinez responded?" "Like a professional, sir. She hasn't filed any complaints or asked for special treatment. Just keeps her head down and does the work." Torres watched as Sarah's crew successfully completed the rock portage evolution. Even from a distance, he could see the rope burns on her hands and the determined set of her shoulders. It reminded him of another time he had watched her refuse to give up despite impossible odds. "I want you to keep a close eye on both of them during the rest of Hell Week," Torres told Rodriguez. "If Morrison crosses the line from harassment into sabotage, I want to know about it immediately." Rodriguez nodded, though he wasn't sure what the commander's interest in the situation meant. It was unusual for senior officers to involve themselves in the day-to-day drama of BUD/S training. Torres spent the rest of Wednesday observing the training evolutions from various positions around the compound. What he saw confirmed his suspicions about both recruits. Morrison was clearly orchestrating a campaign of harassment that went well beyond normal peer pressure. His actions during the rock portage evolution had been dangerous and deliberate. More impressive was how Sarah was handling the pressure. Despite the constant attacks on her equipment, her reputation, and even her physical safety, she continued to perform at the highest levels. Her boat crew consistently finished evolutions ahead of schedule. Her academic scores were in the top 10% of the class. Most importantly, she was displaying the kind of leadership under pressure that marked natural special operations material. The revelation came Thursday morning during the infamous Around the World paddle. The exercise required boat crews to paddle their inflatable boats from the naval base to the Hotel del Coronado and back, a journey of several miles through choppy ocean waters. It was designed to test teamwork, navigation skills, and endurance as the crews battled fatigue, cold water, and disorientation from lack of sleep. Sarah's crew was making good time through the early morning darkness when they heard shouts from the water behind them. Looking back, they could see another boat crew in distress about 200 yards away. Their boat had apparently taken on water and was beginning to sink, leaving 6 exhausted recruits struggling in the frigid Pacific Ocean. "Should we go back and help?" asked one of Sarah's crew members. Sarah looked toward the beach where the instructor boats were positioned. They were too far away to have noticed the emergency yet, and radio communication was sporadic due to the weather conditions. By the time help arrived, some of those recruits could be dead from hypothermia. "Turn us around," Sarah ordered. "We're going back." But the evolution, another crew member protested. "If we don't make the time limit, we'll all get dropped." "I'd rather get dropped for helping my classmates than finish first while they drown," Sarah replied firmly. Her crew turned their boat around and paddled hard toward the sinking vessel. As they got closer, Sarah could see that one of the struggling swimmers was Morrison himself. Despite everything he had done to her, she didn't hesitate to direct the rescue effort. "Morrison, grab the rope," she shouted, throwing him a line. "Everyone else, stay calm and wait your turn." One by one, Sarah's crew pulled the survivors into their boat. Morrison was hypothermic and barely conscious by the time they hauled him aboard. Sarah immediately began first aid procedures, using her combat medical training to assess his condition and prevent him from going into shock. "Why?" Morrison mumbled through chattering teeth as Sarah wrapped him in her own dry clothing. "Why are you helping me?" "Because that's what teammates do," Sarah replied simply. "We look out for each other, no matter what." The rescue had cost Sarah's crew any chance of finishing the evolution within the time limit, but they had saved 6 lives. As they finally reached shore, they were met by Commander Torres, who had been monitoring the situation from the instructor boat. "Martinez," Torres called out as the bedraggled crew dragged their boat up onto the beach. "With me. Now." Sarah followed the commander to a quiet section of the beach, expecting to be disciplined for failing the evolution. Instead, Torres turned to face her with an expression she couldn't read. "Do you know who I am, Staff Sergeant?" he asked quietly. Sarah studied his face more carefully, and suddenly the memory clicked into place. The helicopter pilot who had coordinated her unit's extraction from Afghanistan. The officer who had stayed on the radio with her during the longest 40 minutes of her life, talking her through the tactical situation while enemy fire rained down around her position. "Commander Torres," she said, You were there that day?" Torres nodded. "I was there. I saw what you did for your Marines, and I saw what it cost you. The question is, what are you doing here?" Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "I'm here because I want to be the kind of operator who can save people when everything goes wrong. I want to be able to prevent what happened to my Marines from happening to anyone else. And you think becoming a SEAL will give you that ability?" "I think becoming a SEAL will give me the training and the team to make a difference when it matters most," Sarah replied. Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the dim morning light. Finally, he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It showed a young Marine in desert camouflage, smiling at the camera with the confident expression of someone who believed they were invincible. "This is Corporal Jennifer Davis," Torres said quietly. "She was one of the Marines you saved that day in Afghanistan. She's alive today because you refused to leave her behind, even when it would have been easier to save yourself." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photograph. She remembered Jennifer, remembered pulling her unconscious form from the wreckage of the Humvee while bullets whined overhead. "Jennifer is my niece," Torres continued. "She wrote me a letter about what happened that day, about how you stayed with the wounded even when the Taliban were closing in, about how you held them off until we could get to you. She said you saved her life, but what you really did was save our whole family." Sarah was too stunned to speak. The connection she had never known about, the reason Commander Torres had taken such a personal interest in her training. "I've been watching you during Hell Week," Torres said. "I've seen how Morrison and his crew have been treating you, and I've seen how you've responded. You've shown the same courage and selflessness here that you showed in Afghanistan. The same willingness to put others before yourself, even when they don't deserve it." He put the photograph back in his pocket and looked directly into Sarah's eyes. "That rescue you just performed? That wasn't just good seamanship or tactical thinking. That was leadership. That was the kind of decision-making we need in the SEAL teams. The willingness to do the right thing, even when it costs you personally." Torres paused, then continued. "I'm recommending that you and your crew be given credit for completing the around-the-world evolution. Your boat crew will continue with Hell Week." Sarah felt a surge of relief and gratitude, but Torres held up his hand before she could speak. "But I want you to understand something," he said seriously. "The harassment you've faced here is nothing compared to what you'll encounter as an operational SEAL. There will always be people who doubt your abilities because of your gender or your past. The only way to silence those doubts is through consistent, exceptional performance." "I understand, sir," Sarah replied. "Do you?" "Because becoming a SEAL means more than just surviving training. It means becoming part of a brotherhood that depends on absolute trust and mutual respect. If you can't earn that trust and respect, you'll never be truly effective as an operator." Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper message. Her conflict with Morrison was just the beginning. The real test would come when she had to prove herself to operational teams who might view her as a liability rather than an asset. "One more thing," Torres said as they prepared to return to the training area. "Morrison's harassment of you ends now. I'm having a conversation with him and his crew about professional conduct and the consequences of sabotaging fellow recruits. You won't have any more problems from that direction." Sarah wanted to object, to insist that she could handle Morrison herself, but she recognized the wisdom in Torres's intervention. Morrison's behavior had crossed the line from peer pressure into dangerous harassment. Left unchecked, it could result in serious injury or death. Hell Week continued for 2 more days, but the atmosphere had changed dramatically after the rescue operation. Morrison, still recovering from his near-drowning experience, had stopped his harassment campaign entirely. In fact, he had approached Sarah privately to thank her for saving his life and to apologize for his behavior. More importantly, the other recruits had witnessed Sarah's actions during the emergency. They had seen her risk her own success to save her classmates, including someone who had been making her life miserable for weeks. The respect she earned that morning was something that couldn't be destroyed by rumors or sabotage. When Hell Week finally ended on Friday evening, Sarah was among the 23 recruits who remained from the original class of 78. She was exhausted, battered, and emotionally drained, but she had survived the most challenging test of her life. As the surviving recruits celebrated their achievement with a traditional pizza party, Commander Torres approached Sarah one final time. "Congratulations, Martinez," he said, offering his hand. "You've earned your place here." Sarah shook his hand, feeling the weight of everything that had brought her to this moment. The loss of her Marines, the long struggle with PTSD, the harassment and sabotage she had endured during training, and, finally, the rescue that had proved her worth to her classmates. "Thank you, sir," she said, "for everything." Torres smiled. "Don't thank me yet. Hell Week was just the beginning. You still have 5 months of training ahead of you, and some of it will be even more challenging than what you've already faced." "I'm ready, sir," Sarah replied with quiet confidence. As Torres walked away, Sarah looked around at her surviving classmates. These men would become her brothers in arms, the teammates she would depend on in combat. The harassment and doubt were behind her now, replaced by mutual respect earned through shared suffering and proven courage. Morrison approached her as she was finishing her pizza, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Martinez," he said quietly, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my life. What I did to you during training was wrong, and I have no excuse for it." Sarah studied his face, seeing genuine remorse and gratitude in his eyes. "We all came here with our own demons to face," she replied. "The important thing is that we faced them and came out stronger." Morrison nodded. "I'd like to be on your boat crew for the rest of training, if you'll have me. I want to learn how to be the kind of operator you already are." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she had shown since arriving at Coronado weeks earlier. "We're all learning how to be that kind of operator," she said. "That's why we're here." As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself standing alone on the beach, looking out at the Pacific Ocean that had tested her so severely over the past week. The waves that had seemed so threatening during Hell Week now looked peaceful in the moonlight. Behind her, the lights of the naval base twinkled like stars. Somewhere in those buildings, future classes of SEAL candidates were beginning their own journeys toward becoming elite warriors. Some would succeed, others would fail, but all would be tested in ways that would reveal their true character. Sarah thought about the tattoo hidden beneath her uniform shirt, the one that had started this whole journey. It was a simple design, the names of the 3 Marines she had saved in Afghanistan, surrounded by the words, "Never leave a fallen comrade." She had gotten it during her recovery as a reminder of why she fought, why she endured, why she never gave up. Commander Torres had recognized that tattoo during her medical examination in Germany, though she hadn't known it at the time. He had seen it as evidence of the kind of warrior spirit that made exceptional SEALs. The willingness to sacrifice for others, to endure any hardship in service of a mission and the team. Now, as Sarah prepared for the next phase of her training, she understood that the tattoo represented more than just a memorial to fallen comrades. It was a promise to herself and to everyone who would serve alongside her in the future. A promise that she would never stop fighting to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The road ahead would be long and challenging. She still had months of training to complete, followed by years of proving herself in operational assignments. There would be more doubters, more tests, more opportunities to fail. But Sarah had learned something important during Hell Week. She was stronger than any challenge that could be thrown at her. The Marine who had held off an enemy platoon in Afghanistan had become a SEAL candidate who could inspire her teammates to be better than they thought possible. As she turned to walk back toward the barracks, Sarah caught sight of a new class of recruits arriving for their first day of training. They looked young and nervous, excited, and terrified all at once. She remembered feeling the same way just weeks earlier. One of the new arrivals was a young woman, probably fresh out of college, carrying her sea bag with the same determined expression Sarah recognized from her own mirror. The young recruit looked around uncertainly, clearly aware that she was one of very few women in the group. Sarah made a mental note to keep an eye on the new arrival during the coming weeks. Not to give her special treatment or protection, but to serve as an example of what was possible when courage and determination met their match in rigorous training. The circle was complete. Sarah had gone from victim to survivor to warrior to leader. The harassment that had once threatened to break her had instead forged her into someone stronger. The tattoo that marked her as different had become a symbol of the values that made her exactly the kind of operator the SEAL teams needed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself, new chances to live up to the promise she had made to her fallen comrades. But tonight, Sarah Martinez was exactly where she belonged, among the elite warriors of the United States Navy SEALs, ready to serve with honor wherever the mission might take her.